The ranking member of the Financial Services Committee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Neugebauer.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess we could call this a big government week because we're going to roll out a big budget that has big deficits, increases our national deficit to a larger number, going to bring out big tax increases. But, you know, a lot of discussion has been had about all of the things that currently the federal government's involving themselves in. And the word outrage keeps coming up. And many of us were outraged about the level of the bonuses that we found out that were being paid at AIG. But I think what more than outrage about bonuses, I think the American people are outraged at the level of money that's being invested of their hard-earned taxpayer money into these entities. We find out that now the American people are investors in banks, insurance companies, probably soon to be in the automobile business, and in fact you're going to get an extended warranty from the United States government. And what people are wondering and are outraged about is, when does this big government, big brother, when's the end of this train? One of the concerns that I have is that we now have, people were outraged about GSEs, and now we have TSEs, and that's taxpayer-supported entities. And people that used to get outraged in this body because we were trying to listen in on foreign enemies, worried about their individual rights, and now we have no problem, though, for the United States government to start determining what is reasonable compensation in this country. Am I outraged about the bonuses? Yes. I'm more outraged that we would relegate to government and to government employees for them to sit down and determine what is reasonable compensation. And people say, well, oh, this is only for entities that we've invested capital into. But, you know, that's always the way policy gets started in this country. It starts off with a little bit of a foot in the door, and pretty soon the gorilla's completely in the room. And so down the road, if I'm a small businessman and I have a SBA loan, for example, I'm wondering, is at some point in time the SBA calls up and says, you know what, you're taking too big of a salary out of your company, and so we're going to set a reasonable salary for you. What does that do to entrepreneurialism in this country? What about people that are participating in other government programs? Does the government then start saying, well, you know, we've looked and we know that you have a government contract. You're one of the small business contractors that has a government contract. And, you know, we've looked at your IRS records, and you know what? You're making a lot of money off of that contract. We think maybe we ought to renegotiate that contract because you're making too much money. Now, that sounds far-fetched, but I would guarantee you if we were to roll back this conversation a year ago and you would tell the American people that they're going to own banks, they're going to own insurance companies, that they're going to own automobile companies, that they're going to be over $5 or $6 trillion of their money committed to these entities, people would have laughed about it. But this is really no laughing matter, Mr. Speaker. This is serious. This government, this country, was founded on the principles of individualism, empowerment, and not for government to be big. In fact, there are tea parties occurring all across this country because people are outraged about this. The same outrage that over 230 or 40 years ago people were outraged at how the king was treating the colonists in this land called America. And they were tired of the king telling them what they could do and how much money they could make and who was get privileged and who was not privileged. And yet we're now starting down that same trail with this bill today. What should have happened here is that we should have taken a reasonable amount of time to determine how this money was going to be distributed. Term sheets should have been put together. If we're going to invest the American taxpayers' money, we ought to know exactly what that money is going to be used for, how it's going to be used. If we wanted to limit salaries, you do that before you pass out the money. But this is all really a smokescreen. What the conversation, the debate, and all of this time that we ought to be using today is we ought to be talking about how are we going to get the American taxpayers' money back. People want to focus on the bonuses, and they messed up. They cut a deal with the White House in the middle of the night, had people put things in the bill to cover them so that they didn't have to lose face. You know, the $170 million in bonuses is a big deal, but let me tell you what's a big deal is the $170 billion in money that we invested in AIG. Mr. Speaker, let's return America back to the American people. Let's not infringe upon their rights. Let's not start down the road where government starts telling us how much money we can make, what we can do with our money. And, Mr. Speaker, I urge people to vote against this bill.
The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Neugebauer's time has expired. The gentleman from Georgia.